afternoon, folks. East Coast time, Washington, D.C., East Coast. Good morning, folks. West Coast Pacific time. And good evening, folks. India time, 10:30 actually in the PM. Welcome to the Saturday noon hour brought to you by the US-India Political Action Committee and the Imagine India Institute. My name is Rabinder Sachdev. I'm the president of the Imagine India Institute. We have been doing a series of discussions every Saturday afternoon actually around the US elections and its impact. I mean, till the elections it was more about guesswork as to what is happening and where is what happening. And now, of course, post the election there are a bunch of issues in the coming months, but perhaps no issue beats the severity and the importance and the urgency of the topic that we are going to discuss today, which is related to the COVID-19 pandemic. I have the pleasure and honor of having a fantastic panel with me, eminent minds, each working in their own areas in pioneering ways, even, right? So we'll look forward to a wonderful conversation with our panelists and to the viewers, whosoever is watching. This is right now on Facebook Live, on the USINPAC Facebook page, on Imagine India Facebook page, and my own Facebook page. Guests who are watching this broadcast, please keep looking and please put in your questions and comments. We'll be more than happy with our panel to take up your questions to the panel. So that being said, let me welcome my colleague and co-moderator, Vikram Chauhan. Vic, a pleasure to have you, sir, on the panel with us.
Thank you, Rabinder.
Let me welcome Ed Glicken, CEO of HNG Sciences. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much, Robert. Great to be here.
Let me welcome Dr. Kavita Patel. A pleasure to have you with us, Kavita ji.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Let me welcome Dr. Vipin Garg. A pleasure to have you, Vipin, on the panel with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And last not the least, welcome Hemant Vyas, co-founder of Savinawal, on this panel.
Thank you so much.
Robin. A pleasure. Thank you so much. And once again, to any folks who are watching this show, go by, you wave by, check by, like it. Don't dislike it, but like it maybe. And put in your questions, because take advantage of the fact that we got an eminent panel and a kind of a slow conversation format in some senses. And it's not a debate, it's a discussion. So what you will get out of this panel will be perhaps a very nuanced and wide, of course, understanding of where matters related to the COVID pandemic are, especially in the United States of America. Now, we'll begin with the first round of questions, opening comments. And may I invite Vipin Garg to make his opening comments from the perspective where you are coming, a brief introduction about you, a little bit about your work, and then, the area you want to dig in deeper. The question, the big picture question is that whether COVID, now, or what is ahead? I think the questions are in the minds of everyone. So Vipin, all yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabinder, and pleasure to join everybody on this panel this morning. My name is Vipin Garg. I am president and CEO of a biotechnology company in Gaithersburg, Maryland, called Altimmune. We are developing a vaccine for COVID-19, as well as a therapeutic, a treatment for COVID-19. And I'll tell you more about those in a minute. My own background, I've been in biotechnology, pharma industry all my career. This is my 6th company as a biotech company CEO. I've done a couple of IPOs, and this is my 3rd company as a public company CEO. These are very exciting times and very challenging times for the biotech industry. As you know, all of us have been involved in trying to come up with a solution to this pandemic. And there's been an incredible progress made. Last week, we heard the excellent data that Pfizer presented about their vaccine. And what that tells us is that that's a very good news, because we know that this virus, we can activate the immune system appropriately against this virus and get that immune response. 90% effectiveness is very, very encouraging. So we'll talk more about that. But what that tells us is that we could actually end up having multiple vaccines, because it seems that the immunogenicity bar is relatively low. And many vaccines have shown similar immune response compared to Pfizer's vaccine. So it tells us that we have an opportunity, perhaps bring multiple vaccines very quickly to fight this pandemic. One thing I would point out, however, is that all of the early stage vaccines that are in phase 3 trials today, they're all injectable. They're all intramuscular injection. And really, they're all really focused on neutralizing antibodies and the antibody response. At this point, we know very little about this virus. We don't know what's the significance of T cells, for instance. We don't know anything about the durability of the response. How long will the response last? Are we going to need T cells for that? And we also don't know about a third arm of the immune system that we're not talking about right now, is mucosal immunity. Because this virus attacks us through the nose, that's how it infects us, and it actually multiplies in the nose and builds a reservoir there. So we don't know what is going to be the significance of nasal mucosal immunity, which you cannot activate by intramuscular injection. So therefore, what we are doing is focusing on developing an intranasal vaccine. We've been working on intranasal vaccines for the past 10 years. So we have a long history in developing intranasal vaccine. So this would be a very simple nasal spray, single dose intranasal vaccine that's room temperature stable for several months. It can actually be distributed without having to go through cold chain. And you can imagine all of the benefits of that. So the other thing I would say is that the other thing that we're not talking about is transmission. How do we block transmission? Right now, all the vaccines that we're looking at are designed to block infection and severe disease. So if you're vaccinated, you will not get sick, but you will still be able to transmit the virus to others. So this is not going to provide, none of the vaccines that are in phase 3 now are designed to provide what is known as sterilizing immunity. We think by going through the nose and by activating the nasal mucosal immunity, what is known as IgAs, which is a special kind of antibody, we can block not only the infection of the virus, but we can also block transmission of the virus. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, but I just wanted to start out with that introduction.
Thank you so much, Vipin. I think that's pretty interesting for a layperson to understand, that it could be a nasal spray and at room temperature. I think as a, layperson, those would be pretty, strong points from what I think. And of course, now in the further conversation, we look forward to learning or gaining from you more with respect to what is happening with the vaccines, how soon, what is the efficacy, etc. That being said, now it's my pleasure to invite Kavita ji for her opening thoughts and comments. I understand you obviously come much more from the policy perspectives and, of course, as a researcher too. So all yours, please enlighten us, share with us and our audiences. And please, folks, whoever is coming by, watching by, please put in your questions so that we can have those questions put to our panelists out here. We've got a wonderful panel. Please take advantage. Thank you so much, Kavita, all yours.
Thank you so much, Ravinder ji. And I'm happy Diwali, Sal Mubarak, everybody here. It's a special day. And I think it's been a special week. I'm so honored to be a part of this. And Dr. Garg couldn't be more correct that I think there's a lot to celebrate, but I also think that there's still so much more work to be done. He is spot on. I think actually the world has misconceived what a vaccine is. They think that a vaccine for COVID will get rid of COVID. And he's absolutely correct that it helps. I think of a vaccine, I'm a primary care GP physician in the United States, and I think of a vaccine as helping to kind of train a COVID vaccine so far to train your muscles like you're doing push-ups so that if you do get infected with the virus, then you have the immune system ready to fight the virus, but you can still infect others and you can still get infected and even with the vaccine potentially suffer consequences. So I'll just make 3 key points and hopefully this will be an interesting discussion. I've participated in vaccine launches, H1N1, failed vaccine launches around HIV, Ebola. And here's what I can tell. The early part of Pfizer from the press release indicates that this is what we would call an unstable vaccine in the sense that it's a messenger RNA vaccine, which has never been done in humans for viruses before. Number 2, it requires negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit storage, which is not anything similar to other vaccines that we have used and is very difficult for a regular clinic or pharmacy even for most hospitals to try to do. Pfizer is trying to overcome that with their own dry ice kind of shipment and working with large vaccine kind of distribution companies around trying to think through freezer capacity, et cetera. And it's 2 doses separated by at least 3 weeks. We expect in the coming days to have Moderna, also a messenger RNA vaccine, to have an initial data readout. We'll likely see a press release. And so at minimum, it seems like the first available vaccines around the United States, and then especially around the world, will be some combination of a messenger RNA vaccine or another type of vaccine technology. So what I want to try to emphasize are 2 things. The distribution. You can have vaccines sitting, in a manufacturing warehouse, and if you don't have an incredibly sophisticated plan for distribution, then everything from air shipment, land shipment, boat, ground shipment, all the way to the point of distribution, where you have kits and instructions with gloves and all of the things that someone would need to give an intramuscular vaccine safely in a clinic setting, then we're not going to benefit from this. And then I think that so number 1 is the complexity of the distribution mechanism. And in the United States, we've already seen failures with not being able to deal with supply chain shortage of supplies for testing. And that caused some people to have testing delays of weeks for SARS-CoV-2 testing. Now we are talking about an entirely new distribution problem. And then I'd like to add point number 2, we have a data problem. Our data systems around the world are not linked. You can imagine that if I want to walk into my Walgreens pharmacy and get my COVID shot, and it's my second shot, Walgreens needs proof of which type of manufacturer made my first shot, when I received it, and kind of what the conditions were. And that is we're talking about a digital system that Facebook and Google have managed, but healthcare has not. So that's my second point. And then third, just even beyond vaccines, as a physician taking care of COVID patients, I've become much more excited about the possibility of a vaccine, something like Dr. Garg's intranasal vaccine, combined with the potential for treatments in case somebody does get infected. We do have some very promising treatments when people are hospitalized or severely ill, but we need more practical treatments for what I would call the outpatient setting. I'm seeing now in this area, we're starting to see dozens and dozens more COVID patients, and I'd like to see treatments that I can give to somebody in the form of a pill or in the form of an injection that keep them from getting severely ill and can prevent them from going to the hospital. Because ultimately, as we have now around the world, as we top 10 million cases in the United States and are looking at potentially hundreds of millions of cases around the world, that is going to be incredibly important. And so 2021, from a forecast in the United States, we have a new administration. We have an incredible amount of new potential treatments and vaccines. We need to make sure people get them. And then, frankly speaking, the governments have made commitments to give them out for free. But that I'm not clear exactly what that means. We can pay for the cost. We can pay for the actual vaccine, but we need to pay for the nurse's time, the pharmacist's time. We need to pay for the R&D time. We need to pay for the doctor's time to counsel the patient. About a third of people in the United States, maybe even more, don't believe in vaccines, especially the COVID vaccine. So we are going to need time to counsel people. This isn't just as easy as enter an order automatically and people will just get it. Some might. I am excited to actually be, in the frontline worker category so that I might be able to get a vaccine. But after I look at the data and read the journal articles first, and so I'm very concerned that we're going to have a lot of people who need a lot more risk-benefit explanation. And that is not free or easy and isn't paid for with the shot. So I'll stop there. I hope that promotes a little bit of discussion and some thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavita. I think it definitely provokes, and it provokes thinking and questions in the minds of, once again, as I'm saying, within the experts which are there on the panel. I think it will kind of provoke ideas and thoughts and a discussion, but also for the viewers who want to get a basic sense. It does put forth some interesting questions, including about the supply chain at that refrigerated rate, which I think Hemant could also would touch upon it, because he is kind of arranged somewhere in that space also. Thank you so much, Kavita, for your thoughts. and sharing. Now, may I invite Ed? Ed Glicken, CEO of HNG Science. Ed, a little bit about yourself for the benefit of the panel itself and to provoke the conversation, as Kavita says, and then dig into what you think, where the solutions are coming, or what are the hurdles, what are the challenges, or what do you see happening in the next 3 to 6 months? Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So my name is Ed Glick, and I'm CEO of HNG Science. Spent the last 10 years focused on exploring potential naturally derived cancer prevention and treatments, and co-founded HNG Science in 2015 to formally pursue our agenda. Over the last several months, our team has shifted focus over to COVID-19 after learning and discussing with a number of doctors in the healthcare profession that there are a number of similarities between the pathology evident in COVID-19 and cancer. And we are approaching this from a standpoint of we'd like to minimize, pretty much mitigate and prevent a lot of the damaging effects of COVID-19 in people that already have it, as well as potentially preventing the symptoms from developing, and maybe even preventing the virus from taking hold in the body to begin with. We've been working on this for several months. We're working with teams at a number of institutions. We believe it's part of what needs to be a multi-pronged approach to treating COVID-19. The vaccines are a great first step. As my esteemed colleagues have mentioned before, there are some drawbacks. And one of the main issues is that over 50% of the population may not have access to or even take the vaccine. CNN has been running monthly polls that show a decrease in the number of people that would even take the vaccine. In the one last month, they were down to 51% being on board with maybe taking it. 45% didn't want it, and 4% were non-committal. In order for that to be the move forward and the silver bullet, we need virtually 100% compliance, because we're not going to have 100% efficacy. So we need additional measures, as Dr. Patel was mentioning, things that we can take, products that can be given to patients, possibly even before they get it, as a preventative measure, but definitely once they've contracted COVID-19, as a way to mitigate the damage and treat this more like the normal coronaviruses we see, influenza, common cold, and make it more a livable virus that the world can get back to normal and not worry about it. There's a number of different issues with the idea of building the herd immunity, because we have a lot of people at high risk. There's another issue with enhanced immunology, where people that have been exposed to H1N1 and other diseases and have the antigens already present could trigger all kinds of bad reactions to a vaccine. So there's a population that shouldn't be administered a vaccine, and they need to be treated as well, even if it's a fraction of 1%. When you're getting into hundreds of millions of people in the US and billions of people worldwide, a fraction of 1%, whether it's a tenth of 1%, a hundredth of 1%, still translates to hundreds of thousands of people that could be very, very badly affected by a vaccine.
Thank you so much, Ed. I think the conversation is, moving in some very interesting dimensions. And I had a question which I'll come back to later. So as I see this conversation developing, I hope and I think that the policy folks are, of course, I would think that, they are also aware and looking at all of these. And it's not that what we are talking is, but this must be there amongst the, permutations, combinations of what all policies can be out there, so that ASAP, solutions come. Thank you so much, Ed. Now, I would invite Hemant now to make his opening comments. And actually, Hemant would be pretty. Hemant's from coming from the more the supply chain on the PPE side and all, and the question of logistics, as Kavita was mentioning, and as also what Vipin is mentioning, the advantage of being at a room temperature and a single nasal spray. So all of those challenges, if Hemant, you could share what you're doing briefly, and then how are you looking at, let's say, okay, these are the vaccines, right? But you have perhaps some better understanding of the PPE side itself. So from the PPE side, what is happening there? The prevention part, at least to the part it can be, other than a vaccine. What are you seeing happening there?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, Robin, for having me on this panel. Happy Diwali to everyone. Sal Mubarak. Yeah, so I think I bring a totally different perspective than most of my colleagues here on the panel. If you had asked me maybe about 3-4 months ago, would you ever get into healthcare? And I'd never actually envisioned that, But what happened was, like Kavita was mentioning, I have a family member who's into the ICU day in and day out. And they were having problems with the PPE procurement. And she reached out to us, me and my partner, Sparsh, and say, hey, this is the scenario. Can you guys help? So I have absolutely no background in healthcare as such until then. I come from a technology world, past 20 years in startups in multiple different areas. But it's something that we felt that we could solve this problem in some way or the other. We had to plunge in and see if we can help people who are risking their life day in and day out to save others. We got to do something about that. So with no prior experience as such, we jumped into it. And we started calling around the world, friends, family, business partners, affiliates. And until then, it was going to be a philanthropic aspect for us. It was never actually going to be a business. But what we quickly realized was that people were not taking us seriously. The moment you start talking about, procuring something that has more value than gold at that given time, people were not taking us seriously. So we had to organize ourselves, and that's how our company 7-Novel came into existence. And what we have figured out over a period of last several months is that the biggest problem lies in the area of trust. And we have negotiated on different deals from vendors around the world, maybe Malaysia or Thailand, Vietnam. And what we quickly realized was there was a complete lack of trust. So from the supply chain perspective, I think blockchain would, I feel that would be a really key intervention, because now we are talking about systems which are trusted. People can have a faith in who you're dealing with. And the materials that you're procuring are what they say to be. This was the biggest breach, if you really ask me, where we felt. There was absolutely no coordination whatsoever. Those who were actually into the business for a while, maybe they were procuring. But the thing is, anyone who is trying to enter a new market, this was absolutely impossible, because you do not know who you're talking with, whether they are some fictitious character at the other side of the phone. So I think that's where I personally feel that the innovations are going to come into play. Technology is going to come into play. Of course, bio-based materials are going to be another aspect that I feel is going to have a huge future in this industry. That's what we feel at this point, and I think that's where we want to go into. Is start with the procurement side of it, but ultimately bring technology into the angle where we can actually streamline this the whole chaos that's in the procurement side. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemant. So from what I understand, and that is the challenge, I think, as each panelist has earlier identified, the whole chain of, even if you get the vaccines, how much is the production and how much is the distribution, and the ethics, if not the ethics, the parameters of that allocation, within the nation or within across the world, right? I mean, those will be factors at play very critical. Thank you so much, Hemant, for your thoughts, and we'll move on now. May I now invite to Vikram Chauhan, co-founder of the US-India Political Action Committee. Vic, your opening thoughts and comments, please.
Thank you, Ravinder, and thank you all. Happy Diwali, and I welcome you to the panel. I'm here more for the listening part than talking, so I'd like to say a little bit of a USINPAC. Like we said, we are a bipartisan, non-partisan PAC. You know, we have various folks who lean left or right, but you know, we cater to everyone. We were founded after 9/11 for the Indian American folks around. We have grown into quite a big block in the country, and we wanted to get our folks in the mainstream and getting them back into action. So I'd like to start off at least the discussion. And by the way, last night at 11 o'clock, I usually don't stay up that late to watch the news, and I was scanning the 11th hour, and Kavita, I saw you with Brian Williams, so I'd like to start off with expounding on what he asked you about. Was that what was the biggest medical malpractice done for fighting this pandemic in this administration, and what can be done?
I think, well, so I'll say this, and I think...
Thanks, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. So I'll just briefly say thank you for asking that. And Hemant, I think I'm going to build off of your comment about PPE. So there is something called a strategic national stockpile. I worked in the Obama administration on that for H1N1. We didn't have the cases of H1N1 in the United States that we do now with COVID, but we were trying to get prepared for it, and we had gloves, masks, face shields, all of that. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, and then we had stay-at-home orders across the country in March 13th, it was an incredible kind of cry from all of us in healthcare to get access to those gloves, PPE, gowns, everything. And Hemant, the reason his family member called him is exactly what all of us were doing. I had someone that I work with who was waiting at a shipping dock in Baltimore, Maryland, because a ship from China was supposed to come with some of these supplies. That's the kind of, that's exactly like where our country was. So the malpractice was that we did not have any preparations. And then even as the president tried to stand up ventilators, testing supplies, emergency hospitals with the military, we were playing catch up with this country. And then we all got tired of kind of being at home, and we got tired of some of the mitigation measures. And for reasons that are still unclear to me, masks became a political issue. So somehow if you were a Democrat, you wore a mask and believed in a mask. And if you were a Republican, you didn't. And that, I know that's not the truth, because I look at the same data, the Journal of the American Medical Association, Nature, Science, and I was looking at the data that illustrated that this was much more of a respiratory virus than anything, that our coughing, speaking even, could be enough droplets in the atmosphere to infect other people. So then we watched in healthcare as people decided that they didn't want to wear masks. And we can't force people to do anything, but it still occurs to me when I get in my car, I have to wear a seatbelt. There's no question about it. And it becomes habit. Masks, especially in some parts of Asia, as everyone knows, are routinely used. So the malpractice is multifold. It's number one, we still are not prepared. We have a 1 to 2 day testing turnaround for the PCR for COVID in our area, but we're all being told, and I work in DC, we're all being told to expect that the testing times will get longer as the demand gets bigger. And that just seems crazy to me. And then number two, we are just waiting. I have said this before, that we're just waiting for people to die. There's no, we're not really trying to, I do not, let me make something clear also. I do not believe in a lockdown. I actually think that the concept of a lockdown kind of misses the point. I would be much more in favor of making masks available, putting a mask in everybody's mailbox for free that's a good quality mask, and then also helping people in business, having aid packages, financial relief, so that businesses can stay open at a reduced capacity, so they're not pressured to close or to put people in, you know, an unsafe situation. And then the third, I still, you know, we're on this panel talking about vaccines and treatments and access. I still think that, I mean, even if you believe that maybe only a third of Americans, you know, half of Americans don't want to get a vaccine, that's pretty bad. I mean, that means we're going to have some really hard problems to get most people vaccinated, which means, unfortunately, Vic, we can be here in 1 year and we could be having the same conversation unless we change people's behavior. So and the reason I call it medical malpractice is because if I do not give my patients the best treatments, or if I miss something, or if I prevent them from having access to something, then I am reported to the state, my license is in jeopardy, and I could even be fired by my employer. The government is so big that nobody's asking them to be accountable. We've had 1,600 nurses and doctors and healthcare workers die from COVID, and they were from work-related exposures. So that's at least 1,600 lives that could have been prevented, combined with 250,000 Americans. I fully predict that we will see 500,000 Americans dead in the next 6 months unless we can do something to stop it.
Thank you, Kavita. How about others? I mean, we want to learn from our lessons learned. So what do you think we could have done better?
Can I jump in here and make a couple of points, just following up on Kavita's introduction as well. I think she was right on the money when she said we not only need vaccines, but we also need therapeutic treatments that can be applied early in the disease as opposed to when people are dying in the hospital setting. So everything, all of the treatments that are being, most of the treatments, I should say, that are being developed are for later stage patients when it may be too late to fight the battle. So we really need treatments when patients are still ambulatory. They are originally, when they're diagnosed with the disease, stop the progression of the disease and people getting to the hospital or developing severe symptoms. So one of the things we are doing is developing an intranasal therapeutic, just like our vaccine. Again, it's going to be a very simple nasal delivery because that's where the virus is. If you can deliver the drug there, you can actually activate what is known as the innate immune system before the virus gets too active and our own immune system attacks us. The idea is to get our immune system going ahead of time and be prepared to fight the virus as soon as they're infected. So this drug is designed to be used as a treatment within a couple of days of diagnosis of infection. As soon as you find out somebody's infected, you essentially start treating them prophylactically. And the idea is to prevent them from progressing to severe disease. So we need more treatments like that. So one of the things I would say, what we could have done better, yes, we need emphasis on vaccines, we need vaccines, but somehow we misunderstand what vaccines can do, and we are expecting too much from the vaccines. We need vaccines, no question about it, but we also need other measures, including therapeutics, so we can have a holistic approach to really fighting the pandemic as opposed to one silver bullet that's just going to take care of everything.
Thank you, Vipin. And Ed, thank you for joining. And I'd like to see what you were talking about was beyond the vaccines. And if you can expand on some of the therapeutic ideas you had or what you're working on.
Thank you, Vic. So yes, I think we're all in agreement that a vaccine is, the frontline first approach, but is not the silver bullet. And what we're trying to do is bring a series of products to market that could be used before and during infection. and would target a lot of the symptoms that we're seeing. We're seeing unique systems. New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, have been constantly putting out, both the stories about the clotting and the Kawasaki-like disease in children, as well as there was a wonderful comparison in autopsies on COVID-19 lungs, on H1N1 lungs, and on similarly aged but not infected lungs, where there was absolutely unique pathology going on in the COVID-19 lungs, including things like angiogenesis, which is something we see in cancer patients, where the lungs are calling for a blood supply. They're triggering basically fetal activity that the cells haven't been using for years. And if we can shut that down, if we can stop the overactivation of the endothelial cells, which is taking place in the blood vessels and in the organs, and if we can help stop the cytokine storms, the bradykinin storms, and other pathway issues that are taking place, we can, especially if it's done beforehand, we may be able to prevent the virus from even triggering those symptoms. But if it's given to somebody early stage or even late stage, we may be able to stop and reverse the damage being done by COVID-19 that's unique to COVID-19. And there's still a lot of research to be done. We're very excited about what we found so far. We're looking forward to moving it forward. And the hope is that we can do this in conjunction with vaccines and bring about a solution that the vaccines fall short of it on occasion, and for a population that really won't take or can't take the vaccine.
Thanks, sir. So, Ravinder, I think we went through the supply. So, can we go on to the supply chain piece on this is more a kind of a policy issue, which I know, Kavita, you are in the policy business, so you can start off with. So, Operation Warp Speed has some good gentlemen. I've been working with General Prerna, who's a military guy. So I hope there's some longevity on what they've started, at least in the HHS and the DoD side. And I hope the Biden administration can follow up on that. And probably, I mean, what are you thinking about, and what is happening in the vaccine distribution?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad you brought this up. Actually, it's good, since I know USINPAC is not a partisan organization, and you heard about my background with Obama. Some people might assume that I don't work with the Trump administration. Interestingly enough, Secretary Alex Azar and former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb are former colleagues of mine. When they worked in the Bush administration, I worked very closely with them when they were both in different roles at that time. So I've kept I actually think that you have an incredibly strong team at Operation Warp Speed. And if you're not familiar, Operation Warp Speed is really meant to be what I would call the kind of skunk works, or, the real kind of engine for driving this innovation, and some of, I think, why we're seeing such incredible cooperation between the private sector and the public sector. So I would say that. And Moncef Slaoui, who is an incredibly esteemed scientist and physician kind of researcher. He's kind of one of the heads of Operation Warp Speed, former executive from Moderna, but with decades of experience that is incredible to bring. So I am very confident in some of what the Operation Warp Speed people have done around IT architecture. They have identified a very sophisticated, and I'm actually looking at a picture of it just so I make sure I don't misquote it. I'm part of a working group around the vaccine distribution issues, which is why I've been able to get briefings from Operation Warp Speed every couple of weeks. They have something developed for an IT architecture that they call visibility, notification, and verification. Visibility into what the production ratios are, inventory on hand, shipping information. Kind of like if those of you that use Amazon Prime, I can track my order on my app. That's actually what Operation Warp Speed is trying to do for vaccines. And then a notification mechanism for the distributors, package centers, for states. I think something else that the audience should recognize is that vaccines generally are distributed to the states. So all the states had to submit a vaccine plan by November 1st. It's public. You can Google Alaska vaccine distribution plan COVID, and a big document will come up. But the states are the really kind of then tasked with kind of how to deal with the vaccine shipments and supplies. But Operation Warp Speed is providing the big backbone for this. And then finally, verification. And this really depends on kind of novel software that has never been used before. But Operation Warp Speed is trying to make sure it integrates with existing software, and that providers, pharmacies, hospitals, doctors' offices can also kind of have like access into the back end. So from a policy standpoint, Vic, I like to remind people that just because administrations are changing doesn't mean they start from scratch. So I fully expect the work of Operation Warp Speed to be integrated. But just if people are interested, there's been a problem with the transition having access. So the incoming Biden transition team is having some issues with getting clearance for conversations with the existing staff. And I'll be honest with you, that's one of these political problems that in a Washington, D.C. environment could result in a delay in Americans getting the vaccine. So this is a nonpartisan organization. Those of you that are politically involved, whether it's Democrat, Republican, or independent or something else, I think it's very important for us to send messages to our elected leaders all around, state, local, and federal, worldwide, that say we have to have seamless communication. Communication here is key. If the incredible people working on Operation Warp Speed cannot talk to the Biden people because they're not allowed to, then we're not going to have the ability to pick up the baton on January 20th and kind of hit the ground running. And I've participated in the transition from Bush to Obama. The Bush teams were incredibly generous and incredibly helpful, so that when inauguration happened, there was just no confusion about what had happened, what was going on, what the plans were. And I really do hope that happens. We need it now more than ever.
Thank you, Kavita.
If I may add a little bit to what Kavita was just mentioning about, I think there are two issues that I see. Of course, there is vaccine is one aspect to it, but then I still see the continuation of usage of PPE, especially if I say masks and gloves and face shields and all. I think along with what you just mentioned earlier is about giving everybody the access to let's say dropping in everybody's mailbox mask or something. But I think there is another aspect which is missing. I personally feel talking to normal people is the usage itself. How to use that? And I think that there's so much of misinformation out there. So that could be one area that we could be working on. Okay, people who have family members who are in the medical field or who are knowledgeable about it, it's fine. But there are a lot of folks who don't know how to use the mask. Even mask, the simple thing is a mask properly. So how do we bridge that gap? So that education is one aspect to that. Sure. And extension of the systems that you talked about, the software system. I think the same needs to happen on a global scale. When it comes to the PPE procurement, and because this is COVID-19, God forbid if we have something else in future, right? How prepared are we? What are we learning from this, right? And I think that's the area I feel it's a lot of work needs to be done.
Thank you so much, Hemant.
Can I go back and pick up on one point, just very briefly? Just talking about what have we learned from this. I think that's an important consideration, and how should we be doing things differently? Well, one of the things that I can say without a doubt that we're no longer going to be complacent about vaccines in the future. This is one pandemic we are going through. This is not the last one. We know that. We now know that. And more importantly, people know that. So over the last 10, 15 years, investment in vaccine research has really dwindled, and now it's coming back. So I think it's a great thing, because we need to be ready for the next pandemic. We need plug and play type of technology platforms. We need manufacturing capacity. So hopefully, I mean, we've done an incredible job already with this pandemic, but hopefully we can do even a better job next time. As Kavita mentioned, the first wave of vaccines are these messenger RNA vaccines. They have never been, this is the first time they will be used for a pandemic or for any vaccination. It is possible that having that technology again will help us next time. So all of these things, manufacturing capacity is going to be a major issue. I mean, one of the things that's not being discussed is that there just isn't enough manufacturing capacity for all of the vaccine developers to develop to make enough quantities of their vaccine, even to do clinical trials. You have to literally twist people's arms, manufacturing facilities, or CDMOs that we call them, contract manufacturing organizations, to really convince them to give us a slot to manufacture our product, because there's just so much demand and supply just isn't there. So worldwide, we're going to ask the question, we're going to learn, what do we need to do to make sure we have enough vaccine and even pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity here in the US. We're not dependent on supply chain that is multinational supply chain. If one of the countries drops the ball on a small piece of the supply chain, the whole thing will shut down. We could be in a situation where we can't even supply simple blood pressure medication to our public because a raw material, an active ingredient in that, in that product is just not available because of pandemic in another part of the world. So I think we will see that as we move forward, that there will be a focus on bringing manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing back into the US.
Thank you so much, Vipin. Would Vic, you have any comments, or otherwise I'll begin the next round, or any other point, any other participant who would like to make? Vikram, you, Ed, please.
So Ed, do you want to go ahead and talk about some of the therapeutics, because we want to talk? And how long that was a question I had was, how long is this COVID-19 going to last?
I wish we knew the answer.
Great question. I mean,
we all want to know the answer to that.
Yeah, I want to listen to that one.
Yeah, no, according to the experts, I think we're looking at least 18 to 24 months, and possibly it never goes away, in terms of us going back to not having to worry about it. We go through a flu season every year where we don't know what strains of the flu we're going to have, and we take our best shots at putting together a vaccine for it. But, given a couple of years of mutations, and luckily COVID-19 is mutating slower than the flu, but the situation with the minks, where they, we've now transmitted it to other animals and back, which results in issues like the swine flu and the avian flu. And if we have more mutations over the next year or two, we're gonna see a COVID-19 season probably every year for the foreseeable future. So that's why we've got to bring it down to a manageable disease, where it's like the flu and the common cold, and we're treating it and getting on with our lives, but we can't get on with our lives until we've got a way to treat it. And that's what we're working on. We're looking at being able to provide that bridge to being able to get back to normal lives, between the vaccine, where it's going to have a lot of efficacy, but not be able to protect everybody to the extent that we can have the elderly mingling with children. I mean, children under 7 carry hundreds of times the viral load in their nose that adults do, and you can't expose at-risk people to that, and so grandparents aren't seeing their children, and a vaccine isn't going to get us back to that normalcy for any time in the foreseeable future. So we're trying to bring that back to people.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ed. May I now have the next round, and Vic, please welcome to join in or ask a question to any panelist. But let's say I'll start with Vipin because that's the first round order we went. Vipin, a quick question. Let's say you're developing the nasal spray as an alternative path, let's say, right? You would be aware that there might be other alternative paths also being, developed by some other folks, entrepreneurs, scientists, right? Now, what do you see the chances of some other alternative or path being successful, and how soon?
So that's an excellent question. So let me just back up and say that the first attribute that we were looking for from a vaccine was speed. So all of the focus so far has been how fast can we have a vaccine. That's why what you see that the top 4 candidates that are in phase 3 development or in late stage development are all intramuscular vaccine. They all work about the same way. They're all focused on neutralizing antibodies or serum antibody response. So that's sort of one kind of immune system or immune response that you can rely on. And the good news is that that seems to be working and it's protecting people. What we don't know is what's the longevity, what's the durability of the effect, how long will it last? Are we going to vaccinate people every 6 months or every year? And so all of that we still need to learn because time will tell us that. What we believe is that there is the second generation vaccines that are in development like ours. We happen to be pretty far advanced in development. We are starting our human clinical trials before the end of the year. So we've done all of the preclinical work. We have excellent data. And we have shown that we can activate multiple arms of the immune system, which may be very important for this virus, may be important not so much in the short run, but in the long run, if we are going to eradicate the virus, completely eliminate it, we might need all of these multiple arms of the immune system activated. Convenience is going to be important too. We talked about how up to 50% of the US population is not willing to take vaccine. Well, if you make it, for one thing, a 2-dose vaccination, we talked about it a few minutes ago, Kavita touched on it, at how logistically it's very difficult to track people, bring them back. Some people simply won't come back. You lose them to follow up. That happens all the time with multi-dose vaccination. So you want to eliminate that. In fact, the WHO has published a list of attributes that they would consider as the best sort of vaccine or what is known as a target product profile that they're going for. And some of the things they've listed is single dose, easy administration, preferably non-injectable, if it's stable, at least under refrigeration, that's much better than freezers and -20 and -80 degrees. So all of these things will come into play. And we're not even talking about children right now. We're only going down to 12 years of age. The interesting part about this virus is that the carrier may not show symptoms, but they can still spread the disease. So children can be infected, they can be carriers, and they can infect their teachers and parents. So until we simply aren't going to feel safe until we figure out what to do with 30 million kids in the US and around the world, because that is going to be a sort of a hidden reservoir of the virus that we won't be able to see, yet we would be affected by it. So again, we think an intranasal vaccine would be ideal for kids because they don't want to take, injection. And on top of that, you want to block transmission as opposed to just blocking the disease, because the goal in children is not to block the disease, but to block transmission. So that's the reason we are pursuing it. Your point, there are other companies, other institutions, academic institutions at the NIH itself. There's a lot of work being done on alternate type of vaccines that activate T-cell immunity more so than antibody response. And also people are working on mucosal immunity. So there's a lot we will learn. I have no doubt that there will be multiple generations of vaccines, like any other vaccines that we have developed in the past. And as time progresses, we'll be able to bring these additional attributes to the table.
So I'd like to follow up on that, Vipin. This is for you and some of the other folks. We're talking about going through the trials process, the FDA process. That's going to take a couple of years. So what about bringing it over the counter first? for a vaccine or a therapeutic, and then while you see the effects or something like that over the counter, can we do something like that?
Unfortunately and rightly, you cannot do that. You have to, any new product you develop, like a new vaccine, you have to go through the whole sequence. You have to first test it in healthy volunteers, in healthy young people. You don't even give it to older people, and don't give it to very young children. So you have to go through all these
it's a wrong
steps.
question on the vaccine. I'm in therapeutics. Suppose you can bring it like a supplement,
Okay. Unless you're talking about something that's not a pharmaceutical product, unless you're talking about a nutraceutical or some kind of supplement that is plant-based and is not considered a pharmaceutical, that's a different story. But if you're developing an antibody or a cocktail of antibodies or anything that is a biologic or a pharmaceutical product, you have to get it properly approved through the FDA process.
I think that's pointed more to Ed, because Ed is more into the organic side.
One of our products is a nutraceutical, and it's based on material that already has GRAS status with the FDA. It's been used in human clinical trials for cancer with no adverse side effects. So it's passed the phase 1 clinical trials with cancer. So we want to take that approach. We want to bring something out that can get through regulatory issues quickly. We're also hoping to get an EUA or an emergency use authorization on an RX product sometime in mid-2021. But if we can get the nutraceutical out quicker and get it into people's hands and help people quicker, that's the short-term goal. So what we're trying to do right now is get into a human clinical. As you know, a COVID-19 human clinical is a little more complicated in terms of the numbers, so we're working on that right now. But we're putting that together, and the approach is to bring something to market that can be over-the-counter nutraceutical, doesn't need any additional FDA approval at this moment, and can be made available quickly. We produced it in large quantities. We were actually working with a company in the U.S. right now that's owned by Indian immigrants, and they produced material for us in the past. They can scale up very, very, very quickly. They've done it with CBD and other components, APIs. So we can be up and running very, very quickly. That's our goal right now, is to be able to finish the proof of concept in vitro, get into in vivo early next year, and have a product out potentially the beginning of Q2.
This brings, I'm not going to take a lot of time, Vikram, but I just want to make a comment that what I see here on this screen is actually like American innovation at its finest. And there had been, I'm not sure, I don't want to speak for any of the companies here, but I can tell you that there are so many people who can be part of this solution, and it would be an incredible way to stimulate the economy. I mean, we're in a near, past a recession, meeting certain economic indicators for depression in the United States with unemployment. We have had some rebound in both the markets, capital markets, but I would argue that's because we've got interest rates at an all-time low. From an economic policy standpoint, we should be spurring more and more and more biotech innovation, and then what I would call kind of this last mile innovation, thinking about PPE, treatment, distribution, and also candidly thinking about how to, I think teaching people how to wear masks, services for small businesses, that's an opportunity for a new sector. And if there's anything I know about Indians, it's that Indian Americans and Indians in general, that we adapt quickly, but we have to make sure that we're aligned with the kind of incentives. So I hope 2021, I do not think COVID goes away. I think that it becomes like a regular, like to Ed's point, it becomes like the flu. But I also think that the next pandemic isn't that far away, and it might be antibiotic resistance. It might be computer malware, software viruses. So we have to have a lot of these protections in place and infrastructure in place, IT interoperability. That needs to happen no matter what, even if we did get rid of COVID. So I just want to make a plea that what we need is more biotech innovation that comes in the form of being able to hire, get more jobs, get distribution. And I actually think that's how America can get out of this and help the world. One of the reasons the United Nations has projected that we are going to have generational setback in intellectual achievement is because the United States is not going to be in an economic capacity to help other countries that usually require country cooperation. That's not, my parents wouldn't have come here from India if it weren't for the fact that they were able to kind of get educational visas and be part of that infrastructure. We have to do something just like that again. We really do need an FDR moment. And so I hope that we find that somehow.
Great. In fact, Kavita, what you said was going to be my question to you. In a sense, you partly answered it, because I was thinking you come from policy and integrated perspectives. My question to you was, if you can quickly answer in 3 bullet points. Supposing if you were the COVID czar, like a czar, fair enough. Okay. What would be the three action steps that you would like to take? Some of it, I think, you already more or less you've highly emphasized, and it touches to what Vipin was also saying, that compared to earlier years when investments and funds or financing for biotech entrepreneurship and innovations has not seen as much a uptick as could have been possible, to which you're also referring. And absolutely, as big money going into, because innovation needs money at
right.
Enterprise. So what are the three let's say hot button points you would kind of declare day one if you were
let me do one that's very big and very obvious, but then I'll do 2 that are a little more subtle, because we've been talking about some of the obvious one is getting masks that can be properly used to everyone. So that's a very big one. It doesn't need to be a mandate. I've learned that when you force people to do things, it's like my children. If I tell them they have to eat vegetables, they don't do it. If I figure out how to put the vegetables in their macaroni, they'll eat it. So that's number 1, masks, masks, masks. Let me say number 2 and 3 that are a little more unlikely. Number 2, we need to ease the regulatory burdens from the Food and Drug Administration and CMS. I bring up CMS because if we can have all the great treatments and vaccines in the world, if no one can pay for it, it won't matter. So we need to drastically decrease what has been a kind of a bureaucratic regulatory process, clearance, all these other concepts that most of the American public doesn't see. And we need to be able to bring that cycle time down to less than 28 days. It can take months for some of these things, not the FDA approval, but making sure that they have a reimbursement mechanism, the codes for doctors. That just needs to be shrunk, and that can be done for treatments and even for vaccines. And then number 3, something that nobody has talked about, I would bring on the world's best behavioral economists to be part of the COVID task force. Why? I think so much of what's happening in the United States and maybe in the rest of the world, vaccine hesitancy, not believing in masks, doubting, Tony Fauci or scientists, I think that's behavioral. It's the reason I don't want to get up and work out. It's the reason telling a diabetic to stop eating sugar doesn't work. We have to understand behaviors. So those are, they're not very interesting in the, 11th hour kind of Brian Williams, but I think those could be some of the most important things anyone can do. And I'm not so sure I see people concentrating on that effort.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. The key is to, the common sense elements, and absolutely agreed to the point of behavioral psychology or behavioral economists to be there, because it's about behavior, even social distancing. And there's a lot of stress out there, actually, also mental stress, which is also kind of impacting, let's say, the behavior. People are, even if they're not kind of maintaining what is supposed to be maintained, the way our world is today, there's so much of mental health, pressures, I think, which is also dictating the behaviors and maybe that rebellious attitude also, pandemic fatigue, man, out with it. So thank you so much, Kavita.
Can I just add one point?
Please.
One thing we also need to do is set the expectations right. What we've been doing for the last 9 months is talking about vaccine, 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 and the moment vaccine comes, it'll all magically disappear. It is not going to happen that way. So we need to set people's expectations right so they are patient, they learn to be patient, because that's what is going to be required here. And we are going to have to do multiple things, as Kavita laid out. It's not one thing that's going to fix this problem. So we have to change that mindset that this is a long fight, this is a long battle. Let's hunker down, let's figure out, we're going to have to do a lot of different things in order to overcome that. Just having a vaccine next 2 weeks from now isn't going to magically change everything and completely this thing will go away. So I think that the dialogue at the national level, where people are hearing that over and over again, because everybody's waiting for this one fine morning that this thing will be gone and we are back to our normal lives. That just isn't going to happen anytime soon. And I think more we keep stringing people along and raising their hopes that that's what's going to happen, is other stuff, it's going to cause depression throughout the country. So we need to tell people that it is going to take time. Let us do multiple things. Let us be patient. And over time, we'll learn how to fight this or keep this virus at bay.
Thanks, Vipin. Sorry,
absolutely.
I wanted to get a new comment in while we're talking about all this. We want to talk about the payment piece, right? So I want to just pivot to how we're going to pay for it. Namely, we had something started called ACA, Affordable Care Act, at least from the US point of view, how we're going to pay for it. And that was kind of decimated over the last 4 years, or tried to in 2 Supreme Courts, and then Supreme Court again hearing the ACA. So what do you, I mean, obviously, Kavita, you have been working on it, but what do you think was going to happen to the ACA or insurance, the health insurance marketplace and things like that in the US?
I'll just briefly say I listened to the highlights of the Supreme Court arguments November 10th. Texas v. Azar, which were 14 states attorneys general who filed suit on behalf of Texas and other states against the Trump administration. But the Trump administration supports also taking down or kind of declaring that the Affordable Care Act is invalid, mainly because in the tax bill that was passed several years ago, the tax bill removed the individual mandate, which requires that everybody have proof of health insurance in the United States. And the argument in the Supreme Court was that if you remove that insurance mandate, then the rest of the clauses of the ACA are also not applicable. And what comes to issue is something in the legal field known as severability. What seemed very clear, but we won't know until summer of 2021, maybe later, the Supreme Court justices, Republican and kind of the ones that they're not political, but the ones that were appointed by either Republican or Democratic presidents and Congress, seemed to question the entire kind of argument of these states. And it looked and appeared that the Supreme Court will keep the Affordable Care Act intact. However, the Affordable Care Act was, I think, a beginning and never meant to be this perfect vehicle for healthcare. And I would say that there needs to be a much stronger focus on affordability. We still have so many Americans who can't afford health insurance, and even more Americans. For example, if Vipin comes up with an amazing treatment, it will likely have incredible barriers kind of put into place by insurance companies, even if the evidence for that treatment is overwhelming. So we still have a very clunky kind of insurance reimbursement system. I get paid more as a doctor if I do something. I can remove a skin biopsy in 2 minutes and get paid more than if I counsel a diabetic for an hour. So we have an incredibly bizarre kind of volume-driven system that is not necessarily touched in a way by the Affordable Care Act to address those issues. So I expect a Biden administration to come in, strengthen back the ACA. And you've heard a lot about a public option or Medicare for all. I'm just going to be honest. I think with a divided Congress, that gets really hard. So I think that what you can expect is to see a White House doing things by executive order and very little kind of big legislation. You know, the country doesn't have the appetite to do kind of a huge ACA or a Medicare bill, unless there's an incredible amount of aid tied to states for COVID relief. So I think the only exception to that would be if you can have a way to, kind of inject financial relief for the states. I've talked to states and governors of states who have said that the cost of COVID is bankrupting their states so badly that they're worried that they won't be able to offer rich coverage from Medicaid to people. So I think there are states all across the country, all of them unanimously, that would welcome federal relief. So that hopefully that answers the question about ACA and where I think the Supreme Court will take it.
Thank you so much, Kavita. And now, closing this round, I'll take one question each with Ed and Hemant, and then we'll have closing comments from all speakers. To Hemant, my question would be that, what are the learnings from the PPE distribution and supply chain, which you think can be applied to the vaccine distributions as and when they come, and innovations like Vipin's which come for the distribution and the supply chain part? But first, let me go to Ed with the question which was similar to Vipin's, that Ed, what you're doing and what you're developing is, let's say, an innovation, a solution, right? There would be other solutions which are innovative, you think, maybe your competitors or alternative paths or alternative routes. What possibility do you see of some such innovations, coming to fruition and solution, which could, help alleviate this crisis? Including your own, of course, but what do you see around you as you see, which others are developing? Anyone you would like to highlight or point out or share your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, there are a number of therapeutics in development right now. I think that one of the things we have an advantage in is that, the material we are using already has received GRAS status from the FDA. And we can do it at a relatively low cost, which addresses the healthcare and the Affordable Care Act. We're not competing at that level with an RX product. We're looking to go to an RX as well, but by getting a nutraceutical out, we can make a very affordable therapeutic available to the mass population in a relatively quick time frame. And by doing that, we're going to alleviate at least some of the suffering, and hopefully we can parlay that into a larger scale production and pharma products that can fill in the gaps left behind by the vaccines, so that we're treating people on an as is, case by case basis. There's no one size fits all in this. I think we're all in agreement. But by introducing several different solutions, which is our plan right now, we can address the different symptoms as well, which require slightly different formulations. And as we see, this developing over the next year or two, I think we can create targeted nutraceuticals that will be able to prevent the symptoms that people are seeing that are so damaging and deadly, but be able to treat them as they've already had them, and be able to get the people back to normal. So it's, what we're seeing right now is there's got to be a mass effort from a bunch of different companies. We're one of them, and we're looking to forge our way in the arena.
Thank you so much, Ed. Interesting. And now my question to you, Hemant, let's say, you come from, and this question of the last mile and the supply chain and the distribution is out there, right? So let's say given your experience, here we have Vipin, an entrepreneur who would be getting into the distribution and, of his product once it's out there in the market. And we have a policy expert, Kavita, and we have Ed, also an entrepreneur. So what would be your 3 suggestions to the entrepreneurs, okay, with respect to, the distribution, supply, last mile issues that you have seen for the entrepreneurs is one, and secondly, for the policymakers also, let's say like Kavita, what would be some of your, recommendations, suggestions, your learnings for, let's say, the manufacturers as well as the policymakers? Over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, so I think thanks, Robin. My first quick pick would be, what Dr. Garg actually mentioned earlier would be, let's say if you have a supply of materials coming from one source, and what if the pandemic hits that area? I think that's where it lies. If you really think about it, what really clogged the whole PPE market was our over reliance on, manufacturing coming out of a particular country. I think what needs to happen is the distribution itself needs to be distributed. You know, there has to be multiple sources. We cannot rely on one particular source. So there has to be multiple countries. If that's where we are, sourcing a material from, we need to have partnerships with, and that partnership has to be working both ways, meaning that there has to be a cordial environment to work with, right? So that's one. So innovation is definitely a no-brainer, and innovation just doesn't happen in one silo. So you got to talk with different departments, different aspects of the business, and the innovation cycle. If you really talk about, we need to be integrating very, very. You innovate something, go back, integrate, come back, and see if it works or not. Maybe in a small scale, but then go a large scale. Uh, I think the biggest clog I see from my point of view is not just in the area of procurement, but also we have really not discussed about how are we going to dispose these things off in a friendly manner. I mean, that's another issue, right? So you're talking about environmental aspects, and how are we going to address that? I think those things I would be looking at very seriously.
Sure. Thank you so much, Hemant. And now, Vic, if you have any comments, and then I invite each panelist to please make your closing comments, closing thoughts. Vikram, maybe you can begin this round of yeah, all yours.
So I'd like to end with kind of on a positive note. We are going through a lot of steps which were done well in the Defense Production Act. We are building the manufacturing base back into the U.S. We are refocusing some of the old manufacturing into PPEs or name it. Hopefully, the APIs will come back to the U.S. So we are following that, and hopefully, we are building up on the national stockpile, which I hope we can build up on for the next pandemic, and I hope we build up from this lessons learned, and because we say we have the best healthcare in the world, and we are 4% of the world, but we have 20 to 25% of the cases. Our whole public healthcare system is broken. So if we can at least fix that up, be it interoperability or be it politics, if we can get politics out of healthcare, would be really great. So I hope, I am very much hopeful that we are moving in the right direction with the new administration. So that's where I'd like to end. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Vic. Now may I invite Vipin to make his closing or any new thought also, of course, welcome. Not only, recap, but what is sparked in your mind, what message you would like to leave with or learning with the viewers or the folks who watch this video later on or watching right now also. Yours, Vipin.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me on the panel. It's been an absolute pleasure interacting with my fellow panelists here today. Let me just start out by first acknowledging what an incredible 9 months we've had. There's been an unprecedented cooperation between government, academia, and industry. We wouldn't be here without that. So I think that bears mentioning that this has been an incredible time for the pharmaceutical, for the biopharma industry, and for the healthcare in general. One of the things we've all learned, I hope, that we need a vibrant biotech pharma industry. There's been a lot of discussion about the price control and how the prices of pharmaceutical products are getting out of hand. But this illustrates that we need to invest in research and development. And the only way we can do that, if there's an incentive built in for developing new products. Otherwise, if you cannot get a return on investment, you really cannot keep on investing in future research and development. So this pandemic shows us that we were ready. We have a vibrant biotech pharma industry, and that's the reason where we are today, and academic industry. So the government, academia, and industry, they all came together to really make this happen so quickly. The other thing I would like to say is that we often forget our investors. As an entrepreneur, as a CEO, my main job is to be raising money for the company. Without the investors, the value in advancing science, developing these products, we wouldn't be here where we are. So let us acknowledge that we need all these components. We need innovation, we need entrepreneurs, we need government support, we need policies, but we also need investors who are willing to risk their capital in order to advance pharmaceutical products. As you know, the success rate in pharmaceutical product development is very low. So it is important to realize that investors risk significant capital, and so therefore we need to figure out how to continue to provide a return on investment, so we'll have access to this capital. One final thing I would say is when we think about vaccines and pharmaceutical products, we think of Pfizer and AstraZeneca and large companies. If you peel the onion, what you will find more often than not, the product was originated in some academic lab. It was licensed by an entrepreneur, by a small biotech company, and then it was licensed by large pharma. So you will see that sequence play out over and over again, whether it's a pharmaceutical product, a drug for Alzheimer's, a drug for diabetes, or a vaccine for COVID-19. And that's really how we bring these products to the market, is by having that sequence where academic people started, entrepreneurs take it forward, take it to a proof of concept, and large pharma steps in to conduct large trials and distribute.
Thank you so much, Vipin. And, I'm just reminded of something personal I wanted to share. Absolutely, the biotech industry, I come from the technology industry, telecom background once upon a time. So around the year 2000 or so, biotech was so much, a new area that even Vikram then, we were thinking of really getting into the biotech space, and, we were seeing a lot of potential out of it, healthcare, bottom line. But yes, over the last 20 odd years, I don't think we've seen the kind of potential and the promise that this whole biopharma, biotech space had. So probably that's a reminder there. Thank you so much, Vipin, for your thoughts. I'll break the order a bit, because what I'll do is I'll reserve, Kavita, with your permission, you for the end, because I think you are pretty integrated policy and all of those areas. So you will wrap up the conversation pretty nicely. So I'll take that liberty with you. So may I invite Ed for your closing thoughts or whatever has sparked from this conversation with you.
Sure. So I'd like to wish everybody happy Diwali. And in keeping with it, I think, the path forward is to bring light, goodness, and knowledge to the COVID-19 approach, and to use all of our aspects, all of our means to fight this, to come together as the US, as the world, to fight this by using PPE, by using the vaccine, by taking part in doing what we all need to do, and by bringing other therapeutics to the mix, so that we can get back to our normal lives. We've had a rough year. It's almost over, and we look towards 2021 as being a year of innovation, cooperation, and hopefully healing.
Thank you so much. A beautiful word which you said, healing, with multiple, aspects out there. And it's, as I think earlier, sometime it was discussed that behavioral change, and also it's a bunch of things out there. It's a public health issue, right? And public health would mean, the technologies, as in, what are medicines trials, it will mean policy, it will mean behavior, and so much more, to solve this. And it's the first such humongous public health challenge we are facing as society on the earth. Thank you so much, Ed, and all the best. May I now invite Hemant for his closing comments and all. And Hemant, it seems that, distribution supply chain aside, but distribution itself for the vaccine and the PPEs and all, etc., is a major concern. But you can take your take from whichever perspective. So your closing thoughts, comments, please.
Yeah, I think I already have said that earlier, but I would like to transcend a little bit. And I'd say maybe what needs to happen is we need to really carry forward what we have learned from it. So habits that are good, we need to start celebrating them and somehow inculcate that, not just for this pandemic, but just continue on to wherever we go next, right? So that's making sure that what we have learned, even the smallest thing like washing hands, right? That can go far. How do we continue that habit? So taking it to the next year or the year after, or how do we teach our kids and younger people to continue those habits? So it should become like brushing teeth every morning, right? That needs to happen. So that's one aspect. Secondly is I think I feel that innovation, of course, on the medical side, typically happens in the university labs and or bio labs, pharmaceutical labs, and then goes to the entrepreneur is the one that actually takes it out. But I think there is innovation at every corner. I mean, if you really see the jugaad that a lot of these folks that I'm seeing on a lot of WhatsApp messages that I get from India, like street corners, people have designed their own masks. So I think we need to really look beyond just the typical lab environment to get ideas where innovation can come from, and then ultimately, basically allowing these people or giving them some sort of a platform that basically can be integrated into the mainstream. I think I really, as an entrepreneur, I'm an opportunist. I mean, opportunist. Most people think, but no, I'm here to solve a problem, and that's what gives me the greatest satisfaction. And I'm eternal optimist that I think we are going to not only solve this problem, but any other problem that come our way. Awesome. And we are collectively as a society, not just the US. I really see this as a global problem. I think we need to integrate.
Thank you so much, Hemant, for your absolute profound comments. And I think everyone, the point is the oneness, the interconnectedness of us as humans and with the environment, and the interconnectedness within the innovations and interconnectedness of the supply chain distribution. So it's a lot of interconnectedness and, let's say, exchanges. Now, thank you so much, Hemant. Now, may I invite Kavita for your wrap-up and any observations, any comments that you would like to share?
Yeah.
Over to you, please.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone here for having me. I'm walking away with so much thoughts and hopefully some new friends and colleagues as well. And I'll say just again, like 3 points, I think. Number one, we have the ability to do all of the things we've talked about. Get people educated, try to create an environment rich for innovation, whether it's venture capital, private equity, as well as kind of public markets in general, for more innovation on all fronts, behavioral, biotech, et cetera. And then third, I think we have the workforce. I mean, we've seen incredible kind of dramatic increases in productivity in certain sectors. All that said, we need to have a much clearer kind of language and voice around what we expect. I think everybody, including myself, are tired of partisan battles. We need to find people. I hope that the Biden administration brings people in who can kind of cross the aisle, make deals, kind of negotiate, try to find solutions. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two, I'm inspired by the humanity on this panel. And it reminds me that, everything is local and individual. We can have policies, but we need to take action as individuals. And I would sometimes enter stores, and if I didn't see someone wear a mask, I would just kind of run away. I think we need to understand how we can be models and leaders in our individual settings, and that's very hard. So we have to be more compassionate with each other because everybody is fatigued and tired and burnt out and stressed. And that leads to my third point. You really kind of inspired me to be there. You talked about the mental health and we're not addressing it. it's no secret that any issues with mental health have long been stigmatized or been stereotyped as being weak. We now need to acknowledge that children are experiencing mental illness. You know, people who have no other vulnerabilities are experiencing depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, high rates of suicide in healthcare professionals. So I think that we need, as a world, to understand how to better deal with that stigma. And I do believe that it's panels like this one and organizations like yours and Vikram's that can actually offer these solutions. So 2021 is going to be an incredible light. This is Diwali, so I think it's appropriate that I look with light today and to 2021, and I hope that each of us can find that light individually and inspire it in others.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kavita. Beautifully wrapped up. Now may I invite my colleague Vic for his vote of thanks to the panel. And before we wrap up, yeah, absolutely. You know, I think we've had some very interesting insights and sharing of ideas within the panel, us, and of course the viewers who are watching or will be watching later as we share with them. This would be, I think, a very nice learning out there. Vikram, sir, vote of thanks to the panel from you, please.
So I have learned so much in this last 1 hour, and you know, regarding nasal vaccines, which I had never thought about. I am kind of looking forward to you know, further discussions with you all. USINPAC is a voice to not only for Saturday afternoon, but we'd like to continue this to wherever your next steps are. So we are all hopeful. Again, like I said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, is Diwali, you know. So we are looking forward to further discussions with you all and working with you all. So I'd like to thank Ed, you know, a nice Saturday afternoon to spend with us, and Kavita and Dr. Garg and Hemant. And I would like to also see if you could be available for any follow-ups if you need anything. So you can reach out to me or Ravinder. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, folks. So this was a wonderful, wonderful panel. Now, thank you once again to the panel and to those folks who've been watching this afternoon hangout hour hosted by the US India Political Action Committee and the Imagine India Institute. This video recording would also be put up on YouTube and will be shared with panelists and other colleagues so that the folks can get to see it again or share, because there is definitely a bunch of good, nice learning and conversation out there. Thank you once again, everyone, for watching this Hangout Hour. This broadcast is now ending.